A strangled gasp caught in the throats of those standing nearby as the tearing sound of fabric ripped through the air like a blade. Monica Harris's skirt hit the cold stone floor of Westbridge Mall, while Officer Ryan Mercer stood there, hand still frozen in the motion of yanking it off his eyes, gleaming with a vicious sense of satisfaction. In that instant, the bustling hallway, packed with shoppers, fell into a suffocating silence. All that remained was Monica's ragged breathing, drowning beneath humiliation and terror her mind could not process fast enough. Mercer took a step closer, as if he had just completed a well-rehearsed performance. In his mind, this wasn't wrongdoing or misconduct. He believed it was a lesson, a punishment for a woman he thought was acting superior. Monica felt the cold air rush up her bare legs where the fabric had been violently torn away. She stood frozen, hands trembling, but survival instinct forced her to steady her voice. She knew that the moment she spoke, she would lose whatever control she had left. People around them began lifting their phones. The clicks of cameras echoed from every direction. A few onlookers stepped forward, then hesitated, and backed away the moment they saw Mercer's uniform. Behind the glass storefronts, store employees whispered among themselves, eyes wide with fear and disbelief. No one dared intervene because everyone understood one thing: no one wanted to confront a police officer in a frenzy. Mercer lifted the torn skirt like a trophy, his voice ringing with contempt. "Here, let everyone see who she really is." The words dropped like shards of ice, each syllable aimed at Monica's dignity. Inside, Mercer's mind twisted, pleasure swelled. He believed he had taught a lesson about the place people like her should stay in, and he believed he was untouchable under the protection of the badge on his chest. He thought he could not be wrong, could not be punished, could never fall. But he did not realize that every word he spat, every move he made, every violent breath he took was being recorded from multiple angles. The mall's security cameras lining the hallway captured every second. Not only that, there was the small sob of a little girl, whose mother covered her eyes when the scene became too cruel. There was the whispered disbelief from a young man standing nearby. He really did that. This isn't security protocol. This is an assault. Monica felt every stare on her. Shame, fear, rage. But beneath all of it, a quiet flame ignited. She did not scream, did not beg, did not react in the way Mercer wanted. She straightened her posture and pulled her blazer down to cover what little she could of her trembling body. The humiliation cut deep, but behind it was a startling clarity. She could not hide the fact she had been violated, but she could decide how she would rise from it. Mercer curled his lip, disappointed she did not break like others had before. He had no idea Monica came from a different world, one he could never touch. All he saw was the surface, a neatly dressed black woman, walking alone. He had no way of knowing that the woman he had just degraded was the wife of one of the most powerful men in the entire county. And the moment he tore off that skirt, his own fate began to silently plummet without him realizing it. Monica swallowed the humiliation burning in her throat, but her mind was already recording everything. His height, the boom of his voice, the disgust in his eyes. The badge number on his chest was 552. She stored every detail like a soldier protecting evidence before a battle begins. A strange mix of pain and resolve settled inside her. She knew this would not end here, not for her, and certainly not for him. In the distance, the mall speakers announced the start of peak shopping hours, but every sound faded as Monica bent down to pick up the torn fabric from the floor. In that moment, amid all the unbearable humiliation, she felt something sharply, unmistakably clear. Mercer had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and if anyone in this building should be afraid, it would not be her. The dizziness still clung to Monica Harris's breath as she walked slowly toward the elevator, trying to stay steady under the weight of hundreds of eyes fixed on her. Every step made the remaining scraps of torn fabric brush against her skin, sending a shiver through her body, not just from the cold, but from the feeling of being exposed like an object on display. Yet beneath that trembling, a memory stirred the peaceful morning, barely less than 2 hours earlier, when her life still showed no sign of the storm about to strike. She had stood before the bedroom mirror, adjusting her navy blazer, smoothing the stitch line along the sleeve, the way someone who values meticulous care always does. It was a Tuesday, the quick advisory meeting at Westbridge High still running through her mind. Students sharing worries about school-college applications, counseling sessions she had handled for more than 20 years, all the familiar rhythms that usually carried her day along quietly. There had been no warning that a nightmare was waiting. From downstairs, Emily's voice had rung out bright and eager. "Mom, remember to buy the pink balloons." The sound warmed Monica's heart. Emily was about to turn 12, that age caught between childhood and the first hints of stubborn teenage edges. She had begged all week for her birthday party to be perfect in every detail. Monica smiled, remembering her daughter standing in the living room the night before, marker in hand, filling an almost endless checklist. Shortly after, Monica heard the front door close softly. Daniel had left early. The Fairfax County Police Department's budget meeting always dragged on. More than 20 years of being married to a man in law enforcement had taught her that family life revolved around shifts, sudden calls, and stacks of reports. But Daniel always tried to make up for it. Every evening when he arrived home, he set his badge on the table, wrapped his arms around her, and told her about his day with a voice that was half exhausted, half proud. Sometimes Monica still noticed Daniel's deep blue uniform hanging silently in the closet, perfectly ironed and carefully kept. In those moments, she always felt two things. Clearly, one, her husband carried a burden few people truly understood, and two, she never liked. Seeing the person she loved wear something that could bring danger at any moment. But she also understood that Daniel's work was part of who he was. That morning had been so normal that Monica had no reason to imagine how brutally that calm would be shattered. She grabbed her car keys, took Emily's shopping list, and stepped outside her mood light. Stopping by Westbridge Mall for a few items and returning before 4 o'clock felt like nothing more than a simple task, the familiar routine of any mother. As she drove, the radio played the weather forecast. The cool October air fogged one side of the car window, where sunlight slanted in. Monica turned on her signal and changed lanes toward the main road leading to the mall. Her hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel, not from worry, but because she was thinking about the evening ahead. Emily had been asking all week, "Mom, will you be home early tonight? I want to decorate the room before Dad gets home." Monica had laughed, tapped her daughter's nose and said, "Of course I promise." That promise was why Monica decided to go alone, trying to finish the errands before rush hour. She had no way of knowing that the man standing in front of Westbridge Mall's glass doors, that day wearing a police uniform and carrying a cold, merciless stare, would be the one to destroy her dignity with a single, brutal motion. When Monica's grey Honda pulled into parking zone B9, the clock read 2:48 in the afternoon. She stepped out, adjusted her purse, and drew a long breath. Just a quick stop, then home. A normal day. One small act of love for her daughter. But each step toward the revolving doors was leading her straight into the heart of a storm, where her life would be broken apart in a matter of seconds. And the bitterest part was that Monica had no way of knowing the man who would attack her had been hunting for an easy target for hours, and he had no idea that within just a few more hours he would come face to face with the one man on earth he never wanted to confront. The moment Monica stepped through the revolving glass doors, the cool air inside Westbridge Mall brushed against her face, but the brief comfort lasted only a few seconds before a sharp, predatory gaze locked onto her from across the lobby. Officer Ryan Mercer stood beside a pillar near the main entrance, arms crossed, his posture more like a hunter stalking prey than a law enforcement officer on duty. He paid no attention to the crowd, no concern for the rush of shoppers hurrying past. His eyes were fixed only on the women walking through, as if he were evaluating who might be the right target for the surge of power he craved. He had been standing there since the start of his shift, monitoring every movement with the precision of a trained predator, but none of the humanity of an ordinary person. This pattern was not new. For the past 16 months, Mercer had built a disturbing routine, choosing different women to target each time, women he labeled as arrogant or disrespectful or simply not submissive enough for his liking. His previous victims had remained silent, partly out of fear and partly out of the belief that no one would ever believe them when the man they accused wore a police uniform. Every complaint had been dismissed swiftly by Captain Ronald Blake, who always praised Mercer as a man who restores discipline in the community. Today, Mercer was especially restless. Hours of his shift had gone by without anyone he considered worthy of being corrected. He despised peaceful afternoons, moments where he couldn't exert his authority. In his mind, checking women in the mall was a way to affirm his superiority, a way to fill the voids in his life he never dared face. And those voids made him even more eager to crush others, especially black women whom he secretly despised, yet felt obsessed with controlling. When he noticed a woman in a navy blazer walking in, Mercer tilted his head and straightened immediately. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't timid. She didn't carry the hesitant fear he was used to seeing in the women he confronted. Monica walked confidently, shoulders lifted, eyes, focused footsteps, firm, the exact type of woman Mercer believed needed to be put in her place. In his mind, a few threats and a sudden act of force would break her, just like the others. The very thought made him almost giddy. He shifted to the right, pretending to check his radio, while positioning himself directly in Monica's path. Every step he took was calculated. The crowd had no idea that in that moment he had already selected his target of the day. And he had no idea that this choice was the beginning of his own downfall. The closer he got to Monica, the more her confidence irritated him. A familiar, irrational anger surged inside him, a resentment he had nurtured for years. Who does she think she is? Does she think dressing neatly means she can walk in here without being checked? Does she think she can look at me like an equal? He wanted to crush that. He wanted to see fear in her eyes, wanted her to shrink, wanted to prove that his authority outweighed any confidence a woman could carry. When only a few steps remained between them, Mercer felt the familiar burn of aggression flare in his chest. He had felt it before, that loss of control, whenever he faced someone he wanted to break. And as always, he believed his actions would be excused, even praised in internal reports. Captain Blake always backed him, always signed off on every justification Mercer offered. He was certain today would be no different. Monica remained unaware. She was thinking about Emily's party, the flowers she would choose, the colors of the balloons that would match her daughter's princess theme. But Mercer saw something else. She was smiling softly, her eyes calm, and that pushed him to the edge. He decided to shatter that calm right here, right now, in front of everyone. As Monica walked past, Mercer stepped forward, blocking her path, as if she had committed a serious crime. The tone of his very first sentence was enough to distort the air between them. His voice dripped with contempt, as though he had already judged her with a single glance. And in that moment, in the middle of a crowded mall filled with unaware shoppers, two lives crossed in a way no one could have predicted. Mercer believed he was about to take control. Monica had no idea her life was about to change direction. But if someone had been watching from afar, they would have seen something unmistakable. Mercer was not the one hunting. He had just placed himself directly in the sights of a force far greater than anything he had ever imagined, a force he believed he would never have to face. Mercer stood blocking Monica's path, without even attempting to hide the aggression burning in his eyes. There was no greeting, no reasonable request, only the cold voice of a man accustomed to using his authority to intimidate those he saw as weaker. She stopped on instinct, her breath catching for a moment, as she realized she had just stepped into the sights of a predator ready to pounce. "Excuse me, what seems to be the issue?" Monica asked, trying to keep her voice steady. But it was that very calmness that sent Mercer into a fury. He hated this woman from the very first second. In his eyes, she did not show enough. Fear did not lower her head the way he expected. Mercer jerked his chin upward, his expression dripping with contempt. "There's been a report about someone who looks like you stealing merchandise. Put the bag up so I can check it." Monica glanced down at her bag, then toward the mall entrance just a few steps behind her. "I just walked in. You can check the cameras. I haven't entered any store." Mercer narrowed his eyes, as though her words were a personal insult. He stepped closer, close enough for Monica to smell the lingering cigarette smoke on his uniform. His voice dropped. "Don't start playing smart with me. People like you always have excuses." The words made Monica shiver, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. This was not a routine check. This was deliberate provocation, an attempt to demean her. He was not looking for evidence. He was looking for justification. She slowly stepped back half a pace, her voice softening, but not breaking. "I'd like to speak to your supervisor." Mercer laughed loudly, a sound full of mockery. "My supervisor, I'm the one in charge here. And I'm telling you to open that bag before things get worse." In that moment, Monica felt the real danger. This man was not seeking justice. He was searching for someone to unload his twisted sense of authority onto. His tone grew sharper, every word like a small blade stabbing at her quiet dignity. He began circling her slowly like an interrogator hunting for weakness. She held herself upright, forcing her breath to stay even. But the calmer she remained, the angrier Mercer became. Her composure felt like defiance to him, even though she had done nothing but stand still. In his mind, only one thought repeated itself. She needed to be taught a lesson. A group of teenagers walked past, their laughter fading, when Mercer's voice rose sharply. "Who do you think you are standing in front of me like that? People like you always pretend to be superior." He moved too close, his breath hot against her face. "Step back," Monica whispered, her voice trembling with fear, but her eyes still clear. "You're overstepping your authority." Mercer seized on the words like fuel. "Overstepping, fine. Let's see how far I can step." His hand shot out faster than Monica could react. One hand clamped down on her shoulder, squeezing so tightly she gasped. The other grabbed the hem of her skirt, as if handling a worthless piece of fabric. "Stop," Monica cried, but no one in the hallway dared intervene. "Stop," Mercer repeated, smirking. "It seems you don't understand your place." and with a force she could not believe came from a human being, he yanked downward, ripping the fabric clean off. Fast, brutal, without hesitation. It happened so quickly that no one reacted in time. The torn skirt fell at Monica's feet like a cruel verdict. Mercer stepped back half a pace, admiring the scene as if he had just completed some twisted ritual. Now that's a lesson. And you should be grateful I went easy. In that instant, a sharp pain tore through Monica's chest. It wasn't just the cold air hitting her exposed skin. It was the feeling of being stripped of dignity, stripped of the invisible protection she believed she still held in this society. She clenched her trembling hands, trying to cover herself, her eyes stinging, but refusing to let a single tear fall. She knew if she cried, Mercer would win. Mercer smirked again. A smile that later Monica would recognize as the expression of a man so blindly confident in his power that he believed the world belonged to him. He had no idea that in just a few hours that world would collapse entirely, and the person who would push him off the edge was the very woman he had chosen to humiliate in front of a crowd of strangers. The moment that brutal yank ended, Mercer stepped back, looking at Monica as if he had just completed a legitimate duty. But in stark contrast to his satisfied expression, the entire mall hallway fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Shocked faces, trembling hands clutching phones, eyes filled with helplessness. No one dared to intervene, yet no one walked away. Something deeper than an ordinary conflict between an officer and a civilian had just unfolded, and everyone sensed it. Monica could barely stand. Her legs felt like sand slipping from beneath her. A cold shiver crawled down her spine, but it wasn't from the mall's air conditioning. It came from humiliation so deep it felt like physical pain. She tried to bend down to pick up the torn skirt, but her fingers shook so badly she couldn't grasp it. Everything in front of her blurred for a moment, then sharpened again, as if her mind was forcing her to remember every detail of this horrifying moment. A little girl clutched her mother's hand, asking in a frightened whisper, why did the police officer do that?" The mother didn't answer. She pulled her daughter away quickly, though she kept looking back, haunted. An elderly man stepped forward half a pace, ready to speak, but when Mercer shot him a warning glance, he froze. His shoulders sagged as if weighed down by his own helplessness. Mercer swung the torn skirt in his hand like a trophy. He laughed, a twisted, chilling sound that made several onlookers flinch. He spoke loudly so everyone could hear. A lesson for people who think they're above the law. Look at what she really is. The words hit Monica's ears like a slap, but instead of breaking her as he expected, they stirred something else inside her. A crack. Not a crack from pain, but from awakening. She clenched her fists, began to breathe again, inhaled deeply despite the ache in her chest. Monica stood upright, pulling her blazer around herself, but her eyes had changed. She was no longer just a victim. She was a witness to the truth, collecting evidence with every breath Mercer threw in her face. A middle-aged woman nearby lifted her phone higher to get a clear shot of Mercer's face. Her hands shook, but she held the frame steady. A young man live streaming whispered, "He's lost it. This isn't a search. This is an assault." A little girl farther away burst into tears from the fear of what she had just seen. And Mercer, he noticed none of it. He was lost in a haze of delusional power. He stepped closer again, leaning toward Monica, his posture unmistakably that of a man convinced he was untouchable. "You should be grateful I went easy. Next time you see a cop, don't act smart." His voice scraped across the floor like metal dragging over stone, deadly and arrogant. But right then, Monica heard something no one else could. Not his voice, not the whispers around her. She heard her own voice faint at first, caught in her throat, then growing stronger with each beat of her heart. No. No next time. No one gets to do this ever again. Not to me. Not to any woman. Something ancient in her awakened. She remembered Daniel. Remembered the nights he told her about emergency calls, about situations he had to face. Remembered the look in his eyes every morning before leaving the house, the look of a man who protects the community, but always keeps his greatest protection for his family. And then a thought flashed through her mind, like lightning splitting the dark. Mercer despised her because she was a black woman, alone, well-dressed, and unafraid to look him in the eye. But he had absolutely no idea that the woman he had just humiliated was the wife of Sheriff Daniel Harris. When Monica bent down to pick up the torn fabric again, her eyes rose to meet Mercer's. No fear, no trembling. Just a cold certainty that made him flinch for half a second. The victim he had chosen today was not like the others, and he had just dragged his entire life toward a cliff he could not imagine. Monica closed her eyes for a brief moment, swallowing the tight sob in her throat, then opened them with a razor-sharp clarity. She did not know exactly what she would do, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty: Mercer had just crossed the final line of his life. And very soon he would learn that truth in the most brutal way possible. The soft golden light of late afternoon settled over the Westbridge Mall parking lot, gentle and calm, but inside the grey Honda where Monica sat, the air felt thick and suffocating, as if there wasn't enough oxygen left to breathe. When the car door slammed shut, she nearly broke apart, not in tears, but in short, fractured breaths, held together only by sheer will. Her hands trembled so violently she couldn't fasten her seatbelt. The image of Mercer standing before her, that twisted smile, the torn skirt falling to the floor, remained nailed into her vision. She gripped the steering wheel, inhaling so deeply her chest burned. A storm of questions churned through her mind with no answers in sight. Why did he target her? Why did no one stop him? Why was he so calm, as if stripping a woman of her dignity was his right? But even in the chaos of her thoughts, Monica forced herself not to crumble. The only thing she could control now was the truth. She opened her phone. Her fingers still shook, but a new layer of steel forming in her spine steadied her faster than she expected. She turned on the recorder, her voice hoarse but clear. Day 15 of October, around 2:52 in the afternoon. Officer Ryan Mercer, badge number 552. Assault. Public humiliation. Multiple witnesses. Security cameras recorded everything. Evidence intact. She drew a long breath to keep her voice from cracking. The skirt was completely destroyed. I still have the torn fabric. I will submit everything to the Fairfax County Sheriff's Office. When she ended the recording, Monica realized something unexpected. She wasn't just documenting the incident. She was recording the moment she reclaimed her strength. She touched the torn fabric on the passenger seat. It was no longer a symbol of humiliation. It was evidence. It was a weapon. It was a promise that she would not remain silent. Her phone lit up with 6 missed calls from Daniel. But when she called back, the line was busy. She knew why. Tuesdays were budget meeting. Days long and drawn out. She stared at the screen for a moment, then set the phone down, her eyes dry, but her spirit restless like a wind-stirred lake. Daniel would call in a few minutes. But she didn't wait. Monica started the engine and drove straight to Westbridge General Hospital. Every rotation of the tires replayed Mercer's attack. She bit her lip hard enough to draw blood when she remembered his laughter. But by the time she walked into the hospital, her steps were steady. She no longer carried the posture of a victim. She walked like someone gathering evidence to reclaim justice. In the exam room, Dr. Linda Ramirez examined the bruising on Monica's shoulder, the abrasion running down her thigh where the fabric had been ripped away, and tightened her grip on her glasses. This isn't an accident. This is intentional harm. I'll document everything using the most precise medical terminology. Monica lay on the examination bed, the overhead lights highlighting every bruise. Every touch of the cold light against her skin reminded her of Mercer's grip, but she also remembered his expression when she looked directly back at him. A flicker of confusion just for half a second when she didn't collapse. Ramirez photographed every mark, every scrape, carefully explaining each step. When she finished, she placed the medical file on the metal counter. This is strong evidence. And based on what you told me, this isn't just assault. This is harassment. This is a civil rights violation. From the doorway, a passing nurse glanced at Monica with a mix of sympathy and anger. No one has the right to do that to you. Monica heard her but didn't respond. She didn't want sympathy. She wanted to stand up. When she stepped out of the hospital, the sky had turned a pale grey, but Monica saw something more clearly than ever. The man who shattered her calm in a matter of seconds had not broken her core. She knew what was coming next would be far greater. She knew what Mercer did wasn't just wrong, it was a crime. And she knew Daniel would see this first as a husband before he saw it as sheriff. She leaned against her car, closed her eyes for one brief moment, not to steady herself, but to prepare. This chain of events did not end here. It had only just begun. And somewhere inside the Fairfax County Sheriff's Office, the ground beneath Officer Ryan Mercer's future had already begun to crack, even though he had no idea that what Monica had just done was the very thing that would drag him into a downfall he never saw coming. The wall clock inside the Westbridge Mall security room ticked forward second by second, but each passing moment felt like it dropped straight into an abyss as the camera system was rewound under the cold, steady eyes of the surveillance supervisor. Franklin Moore, who had worked there for more than 20 years, rarely lost his composure. But when Officer Ryan Mercer appeared on screen, approached Monica and ripped her skirt apart with a brutal downward yank that tore the fabric clean through, Franklin felt a chill slice down his spine. He rewound the footage. Once, twice, a third time. No angle missed anything. No sound faded. Everything was painfully clear. Mercer did not just tear her skirt. He humiliated her. He threatened bystanders. He used his authority like a weapon to attack an innocent woman. Franklin leaned back in his chair, his hands trembling slightly, despite all he had witnessed throughout his career. But this was beyond anything he had ever seen from mall security or any officer on duty. He picked up the phone. His voice came out hoarse. "Helen, you need to come down here immediately. This isn't minor. It's serious, extremely serious." Less than 5 minutes later, attorney Helen Brooks stepped in, coat draped over her arm. Eyes sharp with the instinct of someone far too familiar with legal disasters in the mall. But when she saw the screen, her expression froze. She frowned, leaned closer, replayed each frame, then switched to audio on camera angle 7. Mercer's voice rang out as clearly as if he were in the room. "People like you always think you're better. Let's see how you act without that skirt hiding you." Helen pressed a hand to her mouth for a second, then curled it into a fist. "This isn't just abuse of power. This is sexual assault in a public space. This is a civil rights violation under federal law. Mercer just destroyed his own career." Franklin nodded, though something else gnawed at him. "You haven't seen this part," he murmured. He rewound to the moment right after Mercer walked away. Monica still stood alone, trying to gather the torn skirt, but her eyes remained steady in a way Franklin could not forget. A woman degraded like that, still standing tall, it weighed on him. He whispered, as if speaking to himself. She didn't break. She knows what she's doing. Helen's phone buzzed relentlessly, calls from PR communications upper management, all carrying the same message. The video was already spreading on TikTok, Instagram, and X. One clip alone had surpassed 50,000 views in just 15 minutes. Comments pouring in with outrage. A woman assaulted by the very person who should have protected her. Helen switched to speaker and played a message from the mall's legal department. "We need to immediately back up all footage, make multiple copies, protect the evidence chain. Contact the FBI if there is any sign of civil rights violations." Franklin glanced at the screen again. Not a sign, he said quietly. A certainty. Out in the hallway, a cluster of security guards whispered to one another. They had seen the footage, but none dared speak Mercer's name aloud. A young guard voice, shaking, muttered, "He did that right in the mall." Everyone recorded it. "This is going to explode." An older guard shook his head, eyes troubled. "Not explode. It's going to blow the whole system apart." Helen opened her phone, pulled up her notes, and began listing every statute Mercer had violated, each line heavier than the last. Sexual assault, physical violation, abuse of authority, civil rights violation under federal law, violation of public safety protections inside a commercial facility. Franklin asked quietly Helen, "How far do you think this will go?" She looked up, her eyes devoid of doubt. "Far, very far. And Mercer has no idea that the woman he attacked is not an ordinary victim." Franklin froze. "Who is she?" Helen set her phone down, her voice low but sharp as a blade. "Monica Harris, the wife of Sheriff Daniel Harris." Franklin went still. The air in the room seemed to turn to ice. That name changed everything. Monica wasn't just a woman who had been attacked. She was someone who understood the law, understood the system, and whose husband was the head of the county's entire law enforcement division. Helen continued, her voice deepening. Mercer didn't just pick the wrong victim. He picked the one woman capable of triggering a full-scale federal investigation. Franklin looked back at the screen. At the moment, Monica stood upright, despite everything done to her. He whispered like a man predicting the future. He thinks he taught her a lesson. But the truth is, he just triggered an earthquake. And when that earthquake reaches him, it will leave nothing for him to hold on to. The sky had faded into a muted grey by the time Monica left the hospital, but inside her, a storm was only just beginning to form. She sat in the driver's seat, hands resting on the steering wheel, but she didn't start the car. Her thoughts crashed into one another like waves breaking against stone. The image of Mercer ripping her skirt in public, the sound of Dr. Ramirez documenting each injury, the overlapping voices and moments pressed together until the day felt like a film too cruel to be real. Yet what chilled her most was not the tearing of the fabric or Mercer's vicious laugh. It was the silence of the crowd. Silence as if they were witnessing something beyond their ability to stop. Silence as if a police officer could do anything, and all they could do was record it, unable to protect her. That silence clung to her like a cold shadow. Her phone vibrated. It was Daniel. Monica closed her eyes, drew in a long breath, and answered. His voice burst through the speaker, breathless, frightened, unlike the calm tone he always used when handling cases. "You called me 17 times. Monica, what happened? Where are you?" Monica leaned her head back. her voice rough. "I'm okay. I'm safe. But you need to hear what happened before it explodes online." Daniel fell silent, the kind of silence that told Monica he had already stood up from the meeting table and walked out, ignoring every pair of eyes on him. "All right, tell me." And Monica told him. From the moment she entered the mall to being stopped, insulted, and finally the horrifying moment Mercer tore her skirt apart. She spoke steadily, each word clear, as though she were reading her own incident report. But beneath that calm, every sentence made Daniel's breath tighten. When she reached the part where Mercer held the torn skirt up like a victory banner, Daniel snapped. A heavy sound struck through the phone like a chair being kicked aside. He did what he dared, his face flushed with anger even though Monica could not see it. His voice dropped to a dangerous low. "Where are you?" Monica looked at the dashboard. "I'm still in the hospital parking lot." Daniel spoke quickly, sharply, but the threat in his tone was impossible to hide. "Don't go anywhere. I'm coming. Unless you still need to document something for the report. He won't get away with this." The moment the call ended, Monica saw two people passing through the parking lot glance at her with a mix of curiosity and pity. She turned her face away. She did not want to be seen as a victim. She did not want anyone to witness her like this. What she wanted was the truth. Justice. She started the engine and left the hospital, but she did not drive home. Instead, she pulled into a parking lot near the mall outside the range of its cameras. She knew this would not end with a simple report being filed. It would spread far and wide. And to protect herself, she needed to write everything down while the memory still burned. Dusk settled over the city as streetlights cast long golden streaks across her windshield like trails of fire. Monica opened her laptop from the back seat. The screen lit her face, a face both exhausted and unshakably determined. She began typing. Each sentence was a hammer striking the facade Mercer hid behind. Each detail was a step closer to justice. Each painful memory put into words was a moment where she reclaimed control. By the time she finished the final line, Daniel called again. "I'm close." Headlights flashed from a distance. A black SUV from the sheriff's office pulled up beside her car. Daniel got out his face a storm of rage and hurt. When he saw his wife sitting alone in the dark, he paused as if holding himself back from letting emotion ruin what had to be done next. He opened her door. "Monica, are you all right?" She nodded, but he still saw the redness in her eyes. He touched her shoulder gently, but when he saw the bruise beneath her blazer, his expression hardened with a chilling intensity she had only ever seen when he faced dangerous criminals. "He will be arrested." Daniel said, his voice low, heavy like molten steel. "I swear to you, I swear on my entire career, on my life, he will pay for this." Monica didn't speak. She simply looked at him, feeling the tension in him like a wire pulled to its limit. But at that moment she also understood something deeper. This wasn't just about what Mercer did to her. It was about the system that had allowed him to exist for so long, about the women who stayed silent because they believed no one would listen, about the long chain of abuses protected by power imbalance. Daniel looked toward the mall, his eyes turning cold enough to make Monica inhale sharply. He thinks he humiliated a black woman, but he just laid hands on the wife of the sheriff of this entire county. Monica placed her hand over his. "Daniel, this isn't just about me. It needs to come into the light, all of it, nothing buried." Daniel paused, staring at her for a long moment, and he understood. This wasn't a moment for anger alone. It was a moment for truth, for law, for justice. 5 minutes later they left the lot. Daniel drove ahead, Monica followed behind. Two beams of headlights cut through the night, heading toward the place, where in just a few hours a seismic reckoning would begin. At Westbridge Mall, the cameras kept recording the flow of hundreds of people. But none of them knew that from this moment forward, every frame would become evidence. Every angle would become part of the tightening vice closing around Officer Ryan Mercer's life. And tonight was the beginning of his downfall, not because of the violent yank that tore her skirt, but because of the woman he assumed would stay silent and bow her head. He was wrong, and that mistake would destroy the entire world he stood on. The moment Daniel received Monica's call, everything inside the sheriff's office dissolved into a thick, disorienting fog. Meetings, reports, numbers, all of it became meaningless the second he heard his wife speak in a voice drained to ash. A police officer humiliated me in the mall. But when she added the name Ryan Mercer, the blood in Daniel's veins seemed to freeze. Mercer was not an unfamiliar name. He was a problem the system had pretended not to see for years. And now he had laid hands on Daniel's wife. Daniel didn't drive home. He drove straight to the Fairfax County Sheriff's Office. Night had fallen, and the cold white lights of the building reflected off his uniform, casting a harsh glow over the restrained fury etched across his posture. The moment he walked inside, the entire office fell silent. His gaze was so cold that people instinctively stepped aside. His assistant hurried after him, voice shaky. "Sheriff, you're here late." "Is something wrong?" Daniel paused for half a second and looked at the man with an expression that had no place in a public building. His voice was low and razor-sharp. "Call Mercer to my office, now!" That single command sent ripples of alarm through the room. Mercer at this hour, what happened? But no one dared ask Daniel anything more. Not even 5 minutes later, Ryan Mercer walked in, still in uniform. He wore that usual air of confidence, a thin, practiced smile stretched across his face. "You called for me, Sheriff. I just handled a situation at the mall, got a little irritated, but Daniel didn't let him finish." He rose, planting both hands on his desk. His voice exploded, every word hitting with the force of a hammer. "The situation you handled was my wife Mercer." The smile vanished from Mercer's face instantly. His eyes widened, his body stiffened as if someone had struck him. "I what, Monica Harris?" Daniel continued, voice even but ice cold. "The woman whose skirt you ripped. The woman you humiliated. The woman you assaulted in the middle of a shopping mall." Mercer swallowed hard, the color draining from his face. I didn't know." She was Daniel, slammed his palm onto the table, sending a cup rattling to the floor. "You didn't need to know who she was to treat her like a human being. What you did was a crime, a real crime, not a minor violation, a criminal offense." Mercer stumbled back a step, sweat breaking across his forehead. "Sheriff, I was just doing my job." "Your job?" Daniel cut him off, his voice dropping into a deadly quiet. "Ripping a woman's clothing, humiliating her, using force on a civilian. That's your idea of a job." The air in the office thickened, suffocating. Mercer opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Whatever excuse he might have formed died instantly, because no matter what he said, the truth was already online. A staff member stepped in, handing Daniel a tablet. A short clip. More than 700,000 views. Thousands of comments dripping with outrage. Daniel set the tablet in front of Mercer. "This is you. This is what you did. And from this moment on, you are no longer a police officer." Mercer's knees almost buckled. His voice cracked. "Sheriff, you can't. I can." Daniel said. "And I am. Effective immediately, you are suspended. Badge revoked, weapon surrendered. And you will be taken into custody in the morning under orders from the district attorney." Mercer's face collapsed completely. He darted a desperate glance at Richard, the officer standing near the door, but Richard only shook his head and looked away. No one stood with him. No one. Daniel stepped around the desk, standing so close their shoulders nearly touched. When he spoke, it was almost a whisper, but each word fell like stone. You didn't just violate my wife. You violated an innocent woman. You abused your authority. And now you will answer to federal law. I promise you that. Mercer had nothing left to say. When Daniel signaled, 2 deputies entered, ordering Mercer to hand over his badge and gun. His hands shook so badly, the badge nearly slipped through his fingers. Everything happened slowly, painfully, as if pieces of his life were being stripped away one by one. When Mercer was finally escorted out, Daniel remained where he stood, bracing himself against the desk, breathing heavily. But it wasn't only Monica's humiliation that weighed on him, though that alone set his blood on fire. It was the knowledge that this incident was not isolated. He had suspected for years that something rotten existed deeper within the system. As he reached for his phone to call Monica, it rang first. Unknown number. Daniel answered. Sheriff Harris. This is Special Agent Sarah Mitchell from the FBI Civil Rights Division. We've seen the video. Based on footage from the mall's security office, this incident shows clear signs of a federal civil rights violation. We're initiating an investigation immediately. Daniel closed his eyes and exhaled slowly, forcing his voice to stay steady. I'll cooperate fully. The agent's voice tightened. One more thing. Mercer is connected to 7 similar incidents that were buried internally. This isn't just an assault. This is a repeated criminal pattern. We believe his superiors were aware and covered for him. A cold surge washed through Daniel. I understand, Agent Mitchell. I've suspected as much. Now I have evidence. What do you need first? Her reply was sharp and firm. We are sending a team at first light. And Sheriff, prepare yourself. This is going to be big. Daniel lowered the phone, pressing his fingertips to his forehead. His anger had melted into something heavier, something sharper. The realization that this had grown beyond him and Monica, and would now reach into the darkest corners of the department. Mercer, who thought he had simply ripped a woman's skirt, had in fact opened the door to the collapse of an entire corrupt network. Daniel looked out of the window. The night was thick, the streetlights casting long amber shadows across the ground. He thought of Monica, of her steady eyes, and he knew they were both about to walk into the most turbulent chapter of their lives. But this time they were not walking in with fear. They were walking in with the truth. And truth once lit burns through everything darkness tries to hide. From the moment Daniel ended the call with Agent Mitchell, he stood alone in his wide office, the harsh white overhead lights casting a cold glow across the room. The ticking of the wall clock sounded dry and sharp, each beat a reminder that everything from this second forward had gone far beyond an incident or a personal situation. This was the beginning of an earthquake Daniel knew would pull under not only Mercer, but an entire system that had been rotting for years. Outside in the hallway, officers whispered among themselves, all glancing towards the sheriff's door with uneasy expressions. Daniel knew they were wondering why Mercer had been called in and why he had walked out like that, why the sheriff had said nothing beforehand. But no one dared to ask. Daniel's eyes tonight were too cold, too sharp, too far removed from the calm leadership they were used to. He gathered documents on his desk, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not out of fear, but from the collision of fury and responsibility. Mercer was only the visible tip of an enormous iceberg. And what terrified Daniel most was not that truth, but that Monica, the woman he loved more than anything, had been thrown into the center of the storm. When Daniel left the office, the parking lot outside the sheriff's department was so empty he could hear the wind threading through the lampposts. He got into his car and sat there without starting the engine, staring blankly out the window. All he could see was Monica standing in front of him in the hospital parking lot, her eyes no longer wide with shock, but shining with a kind of unbreakable fire he had never witnessed in her before. Monica had not shattered. She had not collapsed. She had stood tall. She had fought. She was not only resisting Mercer, she was standing against an entire system. Daniel placed his hand on the steering wheel, closed his eyes for a moment to steady his breath, then started the engine. He needed to go home to Monica. She didn't just need him as a husband, she needed him as an ally in this war they had just stepped into. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Monica sat on the living room sofa, a light blanket wrapped around her legs. Emily had been sent to Monica's closest friend's house, so she would not see her mother in this fragile state. In the silence of the house, Monica still felt a faint tremor running through her body. But she had written the full report, saved the audio recording, and photographed the torn fabric. The only thing she had not done was face her real emotions. She wondered whether she should cry, whether she should allow herself to feel angry. But when she closed her eyes, no tears came. Only the image of Mercer ripping her skirt with the violent force he used to assert his power. When Monica opened her eyes, there was no pain left inside her, only a cold, decisive clarity. She whispered to herself, "He has no idea he picked the wrong woman." The door opened. Monica looked up and saw Daniel step inside his face, pale from tension, but his eyes lighting up when he saw she was still there, still standing strong. He walked over to her, said nothing, and simply pulled her into his arms. She rested her head against his chest, hearing his heartbeat fast and fierce. He didn't ask, "Are you okay?" because he already knew the answer. Instead, he tightened his embrace and spoke a single sentence, every word falling heavy into the air. "I'm here, and I'm not letting this get buried." Monica looked up. "I know, and I won't let anyone silence us. 3 a.m. Daniel's phone vibrated on the table. He hadn't slept. He had just been sitting in the dim room like a watchful beast guarding against danger. He answered the call. "Agent Mitchell. Urgent." Her voice was short and precise. "We have reviewed the internal files. Mercer is tied to 7 other assaults on women, all covered up by Captain Blake. And there is evidence that multiple high-ranking personnel received payouts from community funds to encourage aggressive control. We are opening a full federal investigation." Daniel shot to his feet. Part of him had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed by the FBI felt like a boulder dropping onto his chest. "What about the victims?" he asked. The agent replied, "They will be protected. As for Mrs. Harris, your wife, we request close cooperation. Her case will be the key that unlocks this entire network." Daniel looked at Monica sitting beside him, her eyes no longer frightened but burning like fire. He answered, "We're ready." The next morning, Westbridge Mall became the epicenter of public outrage. More than 3 million views on the video. Over 50,000 furious comments. Hashtags climbing to the top of every platform. Reporters gathered outside the mall and outside the sheriff's office. But what stunned Mercer the most was the moment he was escorted from holding into the patrol car, hands cuffed. No one spoke. No one looked at him with respect. There was only one truth, shining as clearly as daylight. He was officially a criminal. Hundreds of cameras pointed at him. But the only person he looked for in the crowd was Monica. And he saw her. No fear, no trembling. She stood beside Daniel, her posture straight, her eyes locked on him, as if seeing through every layer of disguise he had ever worn. That gaze made Mercer instinctively step back, even though his ankles were shackled. It was not the gaze of a victim. It was the gaze of someone holding the truth in her hands, the kind of truth that could destroy him. Daniel stood beside Monica not to shield her, but as a fellow combatant. The FBI stepped forward, reading the charges. The air thickened with tension. And for the first time, Mercer understood he had not torn the skirt of just any woman. He had torn the skirt of the one woman capable of making the entire system turn against him. He had touched the wife of the sheriff. And he had awakened a fury far greater than anything he could fight. When the patrol car door slammed shut, Monica closed her eyes for a brief moment. Not out of relief, but because she knew the road ahead would be long and brutal. But she also knew something else. She was no longer walking it alone. Daniel was there. The FBI was there. The entire community stood with her. And from this moment forward, this was no longer the story of one woman's humiliation. This was the story of a woman who forced an entire system to bow before the truth. Amid the chaos of reporters shouting and handcuffs clanking, Monica opened her eyes, her gaze sharp and steady, the gaze of someone who had walked through the fire and emerged as a light shining into the darkness that had ruled for far too long. She whispered one sentence, not for Daniel, not for Mercer, but for herself. This is only the beginning. From the perspective of a specialist in justice and systemic accountability, Monica Harris's story reveals an undeniable truth. Abuses of power are never incidents. They are symptoms of a structure that has been misaligned for far too long. Yet from that darkest moment, the strength of truth and unwavering resolve forced an entire system to confront itself. If you believe stories that expose injustice like this must continue to be shared, please like and subscribe to Join the Journey of Awakening Our Communities. Before you leave the video, leave a short comment, clearly seen.